Gifted and talented. A term heard by most and despised by many. Some feel as if they've peaked early when this term is assigned to them when they're young, and they grow up feeling like they'll never be good enough. Never feeling like they'll reach the highs in life that they should. Okay. I realize now that was a bit of a heavy way to start a video about Monster Hunter, but I assure you this is indeed a video about Monster Hunter, and much like the Lunastra video, it will focus on one particular monster. Now the whole point of that opening paragraph was to draw a really dumb parallel between a very genuine problem in society and the balancing and changes made in video games. And I'm realizing it was dumb, but I'm sticking with it, so let's ride. Monster Hunter is no stranger to adjusting the power levels of monsters. In fact, it's been a balancing staple of the series for years. Every time a new iteration of an existing monster rolls around, it gets some new moves or mechanics and gets rebalanced accordingly. Hell, you only need to compare monsters like Tobigidachi, Nagakuga, and Barioth between World and Rise to see what I'm getting at, but I truly believe there is a single monster, one that was introduced all the way back at the series' inception, that has been done the dirtiest of all. That's right, today, ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you the story of the Monobloss. Now, I'd forgive you if you've never heard of the Monobloss. In fact, people who have started their monster hunting journey recently may even be like, don't you mean the Diabloss, bro? No, I don't mean the fucking Diabloss. I mean the Monobloss. The Diabloss is a traitorous swine. But I'm getting ahead of myself, so to truly understand the plight of the Monobloss, we must go all the way back to 2005 when the original Monster Hunter was released. Considered a cult classic by many, the original Monster Hunter was Capcom's attempt at breaking into the online multiplayer market, and whilst it didn't really make any waves outside of Japan, some of the series' most iconic monsters can be traced all the way back to the original. Now, given the box art, one might assume that the Rathalos is the final boss of the game. I mean, it's a pretty safe bet for games of that era. A big angry monster on the box is probably going to be the big angry monster you have to take down at the end of the game, and whilst Rathalos certainly used to be more difficult than it is now, mostly as a result of the gameplay, it was another monster that was the final boss for the solo offline portion of the game. Can you see where I'm going with this? Now back then, only 3 Elder Dragons were in the original Monster Hunter, and all of them were exclusively online. And given that online play wasn't the powerhouse it is today, and you can no longer access it, a good portion of the player base would find their final challenge in the Monobloss. A quote-unquote flying wyvern with a broad frill and a single gigantic crimson horn adorning its face. It specialized in charges and horn thrusts, as well as burrowing into the ground to burst out from below, catching unsuspecting hunters off guard. Sound familiar? After dealing with a variety of elemental powerhouses like Rathalos, Plesioth, Khezu, and Gravios, Monobloss was the final challenge, brute force incarnate. Okay, so a great start for the Monobloss, you may think. The final urgent quest of the village quest line before the credits roll, alongside an in-game story where the Kokoto village chief fought and slayed a Monobloss with the hero's blade, earning him the title the hero of Kokoto in his youth. This all sounds great, and frankly, it's about as much lore as you can hope to get out of a Monster Hunter game. Monobloss was a pretty tough challenge in the original. Its damage was high, and its speed and ear-splitting scream more than made up for its lack of an element. But, unfortunately, this success was short-lived. Let's jump ahead now to the second generation. We'll skip over Monster Hunter DOS because that was kinda weird with its quest leveling and it was only released in Japan, and we'll jump into Monster Hunter Freedom 2 and Freedom Unite. Alright, so now that we're here, let's take a quick gander at the village questline. 1 star is all your basic intro stuff, 2 star and 3 star are your beginner monsters, 4 star is your... Hold up. What is this I see? Monobloss? Sitting in the middle of the 4-star quests? Ah yes, the first blow of several to come for our king. Queen. I don't know. In the second generation, a mere few years later, Monobloss has gone from the final boss before the credits rolled to listed in quests alongside the likes of Iodrome and 15 Pieces of Coal. Oh, how the mighty fall. Monobloss was one of the first monsters to suffer such a fate, being scaled down in health, damage, and speed to essentially be an inferior Diabloss. To make it worse, pretty much every other late game monster from the first game remained at their 5-star level, except for our friend the Monobloss. And I guess the Khezu, who admittedly was never really hard in the first place, just kind of annoying. Anyway, and if you think that's bad, just wait till you see what happens in Generation 3. As development of the third generation of Monster Hunter began and Tri was getting ready to change the monster hunting landscape as we knew it, a big decision was made. The third generation would, at least in its first iteration, stray from previous design philosophies and build a roster of almost entirely new monsters. This of course meant that a lot of the classics would not make the final cut, and well, that's fine, that's cool, there's not inherently a problem with that. And ultimately only 3 large monsters made the cut to be redesigned and brought to life in Monster Hunter Tri. The first 2 were a no-brainer, the Rathalos and the Rathian. Rathalos is the cover boy for the entire series and would be like making a Pokemon game without Pikachu or Charizard, and Rathian is just the female version, so that made sense too. Now, I'll give you a guess who made it into our 3rd slot. Go on, think really hard about this one. I'll give you a hint. Its name ends in Bloss. That's right, the Diablos. Such disrespect. When push came to shove, none other than the Diablos made its appearance in the sandy plains, with Monoblos nowhere to be seen. Now don't get me wrong, I love the Diablos. It just gets a whole lot more love than the Monoblos does, and in my opinion, Monoblos is the more interesting design visually. Now, moving on from that, Monoblos would be entirely absent from the series for a generation and a half, not appearing at all in Monster Hunter Tri, 3 Ultimate, Portable 3rd, or 4, before once again being featured for the final time as of the recording of this video in Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate. Now to be fair, this appearance was a bit of a redemption arc for poor old Monoblos, as its power was somewhat returned to it, and it appeared alongside some of its old contemporaries like Rathalos and Gravios. It has since then, at least in the main series, been entirely absent. No appearance in Generations or Generations Ultimate, 2 games that were literally based around bringing back a whole bunch of elements and monsters from previous games in celebration of the franchise. And then once again, Diablos was brought forward into Monster Hunter World as the apex monster of the Wildspire Wastes. To then add further Diablos insult to Monoblos injury, the Bloodbath Diablos Deviant was the second of 2 flagship monsters for Generations Ultimate, and one of the strongest monsters in the game, and Diablos was one of the few monsters to have an Apex version appear in the Rampage quests of Monster Hunter Rise. So, that is the sad, sad story of a dear old friend. A tyrant toppled from his throne with little remorse being shown by our overlords at Capcom. Now, to be fair, Monoblos did appear in Monster Hunter Stories 2, which was nice, but a far cry from its mainline appearances. And there are certainly other monsters that have suffered a similar fate, but, to me at least, few stick out in my mind as Monoblos does. Maybe I just really like its design, maybe a little too much, but I just feel like the potential is there for a great hunt that differs from Diablos in more ways than just visual design. Bring back Monoblos, I say. Give it the glory it deserves. Make Monster Hunter great again. No, we can't do that. Don't do that. Don't use that. Cut that line. Thanks for watching the video, folks, and if you've made it this far, why not drop a like and subscribe? Share it with a friend even. I put out videos as often as I can about whatever tickles my fancy at the time, but mainly they will be about Monster Hunter or Pokemon, cause, well, I like Monster Hunter and Pokemon. If you like the content of this channel, why not check out the second channel as well, Peak Ginge Plus, where I do some Pokemon drawing stuff that's sort of just a little side hobby of mine. Anyway, that's about it for this one. Thanks for sticking around, hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you on the next one, folks. Bye-bye.